And so it encompasses all sorts of legal issues this person could be facing. It could be they have an eviction record. It could be they were arrested for camping. It could be all sorts of things. But the common thing is if they answer yes to this question, it means that they have some sort of legal stuff going on that is making it harder to get housing. So we look to see how having an identified legal need related with vulnerability, housing, and health. About 20% of, so I said there's 17,000 people in our sample, 20% of them answered yes to this question, said that they had some legal stuff going on that made it harder to get housing. And so if we go back to, that's, what is it, 3,400 people. So out of the 17,000 people, there were 3,400 people that had at least one legal issue that was making it harder to get housing. And so what we saw, what these are going to be showing you, you're going to see a bunch of dots. What each one is showing you is how much, for someone with legal issues, how much more likely they had that thing. And so 0 is here. If they're to the right of the 0, to the right of the 0, that means that person, if someone had legal issues, they were more likely to have this thing. And so what this is telling you, there's a score in the VI SPDAT for different sections. So history of homelessness, risks, socialization, wellness. A higher score means that they're more vulnerable. For someone with legal issues, they scored higher in all these areas. So if someone had legal stuff going on, they were more likely to have had more experiences of homelessness or for a longer time. They were at more risk for other sorts of vulnerabilities. They had less socialization. They had lower wellness. And so this meant, like, if someone had legal stuff going on, this one's just single adults, but they were more likely to be vulnerable, essentially, according to the VI SPDAT in these different categories. And then when we broke it down too, these are all those questions that I showed before about mental health concerns, head injury, how many times you used the ER, how many ambulance rides you took. For almost all of them, except for 2, they were more likely to have these issues. And so taken together, what this means, someone with legal issues was also more likely to have more health barriers or require more health care. So for example, where's one? So mental health concerns is this one. So someone with legal issues was 13 percentage points more likely to have a mental health concern. So this is actually a lot in our sample. It's about twice as likely to have a mental health concern if someone had a legal stuff going on. This is for families, but we see a very similar pattern. Everything's to the right of the 0. We didn't have as much data on all their health concerns, but we can see that for someone in a family, if they had legal stuff going on, they went to the ER 0.5 more times. So that means on average, like if we had 2 families, one went to the ER an extra time if they had legal stuff going on. They were more likely to be hospitalized. They had 0.1 more hospitalizations. So they were going to the hospital more. They were going to the ER more for healthcare. So for single adults, the actual like health barriers they're facing definitely higher. And then there were more usage of hospitals and ERs for medical care for families experiencing homelessness that also had legal things going on. And so essentially having a legal need strongly related with how vulnerable they were according to the assessment, their housing needs, and then also their medical needs. So this meant that the legal and medical issues compounded with each other. To follow up on this, we also did here at Christian Service Center in the patio area a needs assessment of people experiencing homelessness with their legal and barriers to getting legal services and medical services. And then this idea of a mobile health clinic where that would combine both medical and legal services. And so right now, I believe it's just providing health services. Looking at Eric, yes, it's only providing health services. And so our proposal would be to do mobile, medical, legal services. So in one spot, they can get their healthcare, they could get preventative care, potentially prescriptions, but then they could also have someone who help them with any legal issues going on while they're there. And it's mobile. It's not just in one fixed place, but it could go to the people wherever they're located. But we wanted to know, would people be interested in this? Would they use it? What specific barriers are they facing that this could help them overcome? So we did a short survey of about 6 questions. The medical students went around the patio and talked to people. They had surveys where people would circle things, but they also wrote down and they said some people talked to them for 30 minutes for this 6-question survey and told them all sorts of things that they wrote down. And so we are including all sorts of these things too. But we wanted to know what are the barriers they're facing and would they be interested in this and what should it look like? So we got about 75 like full surveys that we were able to use. We asked for what legal concerns are they facing? So I showed you that VI Spit Out one before. It was just, do you have legal stuff going on? Period. This one broke it down. Are you facing fines and fees? Do you have housing related legal issues? So like an eviction, restrictions on living situations, like because of some legal issue, you can only live in a certain place. Problems getting identification or benefits, so they don't have an ID, or they're able to get subsidized housing, but they need to have all sorts of like bank statements, for example, family law, or some sort of discrimination. We asked, did they have a physical or mental health condition or disability that made it harder to get to access or maintain housing? And then for both legal and medical services, we asked them what specific barrier they faced. So whether it was transportation, time, information, the cost of the services, the lack of availability. They went before, but they had a negative experience. Or then difficulty understanding legal/medical language or processes. So it's just confusing. I don't understand what I'm reading or what I'm signing up for. And then we also asked about this mobile medical legal partnership. So what we found, 92% of the people surveyed had at least one legal need. So if you remember the 5 minutes ago, it was only 20% of people said they had legal stuff going on. That survey, if they're a single adult, is only for people typically who've been experiencing homelessness for at least a year. This one, we just walked around the patio, and so it's whoever comes to Christian Service Center on a typical day, and they came out on a few days. And they found getting identification and benefits. So it wasn't eviction, it wasn't they were arrested, but it was actually getting their identification. So it could be, a driver's license or ID, or accessing some sort of benefits where they knew they existed, but they were having legal issues and getting it. Maybe they qualified for it, but were having difficulty coming up with the documentation to prove that they are eligible for it. And you're going to hear more about that later too. Half of them had some sort of housing related legal issue. So this could be an eviction. And then 40% were facing fines and fees that made it difficult. Or that was a legal need also. So this is also very high too. So even though it's only the third one on there, 40% of guests here were facing some sort of fine or fee that was making it difficult to get housing. About 2/3 had more than one need, and 15% of the guests had 4+ needs. So I listed 6 different needs, and 15% said yes to at least 4 of these needs. So there. What this is showing is for the barriers to services by barrier type. And so the darkest bar at the top of each one is how many said yes to this barrier for legal needs, then for medical needs, and then for both. So the most common barrier was lack of transportation. So having a difficult time getting to the service. So even if they knew it existed or they could use it, they had a difficult time getting to that service provider. About half of people said that they had this barrier, and 44%, so almost half, also said that they face this barrier for both legal and medical services. Cost was also a major issue. About half, 40%, said that cost was an issue for legal services, and 40% said cost was an issue for medical services, and about 30% of people, about a third of them, said it was an issue for both types of services. The other ones are a bit less common, but still some are high. So about a third said that they lacked information, and that was a barrier. Lack of availability. They had about a third said with actually legal services that they tried getting services before, but they had a negative experience with it. And then about a quarter of people had said the same thing for medical services, where they tried getting medical services, but they had some negative experience with it. I mentioned the students, they had some conversations with people too. These are some things that came out about it, but also about the mobile medical legal partnership. So 80% said that they would be likely to use a mobile medical legal partnership. And actually, when it was someone who had a legal need, it was 90% said that they would be likely to use a mobile medical legal partnership. But we didn't stop there. We were like, what would you like to see in this mobile medical legal partnership? So a lot like that, it was combined in one place. And so if you think to like transportation is a major issue, one, if it came to me and at one time I can get both medical and legal services, this would be very valuable. So don't split things up. They go together. I'm facing two of these things at once. Let's clicker. What else? 2/3 about would like to see emphasize non-judgmental, respectful treatment from staff. So this was a big part of it too. Was they want to make sure that if they go to the service, that they're treated respectfully, that it has that they feel dignity when they go to these services. And it's not just here's another patient or client that I need to get through, but they feel respected while there. About half want the partnerships at shelters, bus stops, or places that they go. About half want help with paperwork and applications. So again, this is a very big barrier, is just filling out the paperwork. Half would like it to be kind of like walk-in, so you could go without an appointment. But essentially, again, that they would be very likely, especially if they were facing some sort of legal issue, to go. And so kind of the combination of this, so legal need is a health indicator. It relates a lot of legal and health for people experiencing homelessness goes together. They're facing a lot of the same challenges and the same barriers to getting services. Families and single adults might need a little bit of different approaches, but this is just because of what they're facing. And if you're a single adult who's experienced homelessness for a year, you might require different services than a household with children who have been homeless for a week. But understanding how do we tailor services to each individual client while offering comprehensive services is part of a challenge also. People would be very excited by this. And transportation and cost were the biggest issue, not motivation. Most of the people in this room, that might not be a surprise. But transportation and cost are the issues. It's not the motivation or wanting to get help, but it's these barriers to getting the help. Here's my email, but I think we can do questions now. Yes, okay. So that's the presentation. Thank you. Here's my email if you think of questions later, but we'll do questions now too if anyone has any or other reactions or thoughts to it. But thank you. So, do you want to?
Go ahead. I have a homeless friend that's been homeless in Orlando for over 25 years. I've known him before he was homeless. And now he's 62 and he's going through serious medical problems. He came to see Dr. Pia on the 4th. I dropped him off and then he went in the hospital. He's still in the hospital. He called me Sunday night. And he's got something wrong with his spleen. He has a history of alcoholism. And but they're sending him to a psychiatrist every day, and I don't know if he's ever going to get out of Orlando at this point. So he's kind of fed up at this point. I'm sure he's stir crazy from being there so long, but his health is declining so much. I picked him up on the 4th. I took him to get his Lynx bus pass. Of course, he hasn't been able to use it. And then I brought him here, and he wasn't even able to keep anything on his stomach at that point. And he just qualified for retirement, Social Security retirement, and they're going to help him here get into some housing after the medical procedure at John Young and 50. But I don't know if he's ever going to get out of the hospital. What can I do to precipitate finding out what's going on? Because he doesn't even understand what they're testing on his spleen and what's going on with him at this point with the doctors.
I'm going to redirect this to Carla or Christina. Other ideas? No? Oh, in the back. Someone raised their hand.
So it's always really unfortunate and that someone is dealing with a medical crisis. I'm sorry that you're having to deal with that to me, the best thing you can do is be there for him in the moment, keep having that relationship, helping to encourage him that there we hope that when he gets out of the hospital, like we want that as the end result, right? We want him out of the hospital. That we know that he's already registered for a housing program to do his recovery. And so I was just texting with Lauren. I was like, I think this is the guy on one of your caseloads, and he's like, it is. And so like they're holding a bet for him for his recovery. So what's nice about this room is there's a system of care present. So we have representatives from HSN here. We have the Hope team. We have Orange Blossom Family Health. We have Empower. We have so many different service providers in this room that by having an advocate reach out and talk to us, we're able to better communicate and follow up. And so he is in good hands when he's ready for exit.
Well, the thing is, when they discharge him, he doesn't even know when they're going to discharge him. They just automatically send him down to the lobby, and he's booted out.
Well, thankfully, his case manager, Miss Cheryl, call her out, she's great, is already in contact with him. So as soon as he's released from the hospital, she will be aware of it, so that she can help coordinate the transportation, all of those components.
And he's really stressed in the back.
Okay. Keep me in his friend. Keep showing up.
He
That's
keeps
the best
calling
thing
me, and I talk to him as long as I can. And I say that, when you're ready to get out, let me know how I can help you get your affairs in order, drive you to these places to get things you need, and that's all I can do, I guess.
I will say he's very lucky to have a friend like you. Unfortunately, most of our friends experience homelessness don't have a housed ally. They don't have that advocate, that person they can call. And so having someone in their life instantly puts them in a better position for moving forward to stability. So thank you for sticking with him through 25 years of trials and tribulations.
My question is twofold. One is the data regarding are you replicating?
Thanks. And so the questions were, it was the data new, and then are we replicating it or is it new? Okay. So the data, the first one I showed, where we had the 17,000 assessments, that's from 2015 through 2024. Most are actually since about 2021, but it goes back about 10 years. We look to see where there are differences over time. Not really. So we kind of see a consistent thing going on there. The needs assessment data, that was all collected last fall. So like September, October, so maybe like 6 months old or so. So relatively recent. And then for the mobile medical legal partnership, we submitted for a grant to start it, so it would be new. So the mobile unit is going around, but it's not the mobile medical legal partnership for people experiencing homelessness yet. That's what I think actually this week we're hoping to hear really great news about it, but we'll see. But yes, but that would be a new project going on. There's some similar things across the country, but I don't think quite set up like this and encompassing everything. This the mobile piece, the medical piece, and the legal piece all at once.
Andrew, so maybe this is more of a comment than a question, but you could maybe respond to it. You said it's something interesting. You said motivation at one point in time, and it seems to me that people work to meet their most critical needs. So if I think my most critical need is I need ID, I show up to dignity. If I think my most critical need is food, I might come to CFC for a meal. If I think it's shelter, I might show up to shelter. If it's a broken leg, I'm going to go to the emergency room. But as you mentioned, there's this crossing of needs that for someone who's unsheltered in particular, they're layered, they're multi-dimensional. It just kind of makes me think that, as a system, we need to be thinking about this. And because people may not be prioritizing their most critical need also. And that part of the process of helping someone stabilized is identifying what those other needs are and beginning to kind of get
Mm.
at them in a way. So it makes me think of, does iDignity have a partnership with HCCH to make sure that there's a medical referral? Does ORMC have the proper, connections? Start thinking about legal connections. Um, and so anyway, just I think that's I think really clear out of that data is that we need to be thinking about that. I don't know if you have comments on what you see as potential and what needs to be in place for a system to be able to do that. And I'm thinking particularly about thinking a lot about how the homeless service system, health systems are adopting social determinants of health.
Mhm.
Is there opportunities for us in other systems to begin to utilize that language in a way that helps us get at some of these other various needs?
Yeah, I think the more we can start integrating some of this information together to know that this person went to identity, so they face this, but they also maybe know ahead of time. So when we look at some of the communities that have done this, so maybe more like LA, Lingway did stuff in like Allegheny County, like starting to integrate some of these like health information, or for like kids with the education system and knowing the schools are connected, because that's always a big challenge. I just read another one. It was or talked to someone. It was identifying students experiencing homelessness, and even if they show up in the shelter, there was still like a disconnect. And so not here I'm talking about. The more we can integrate these sort of systems, but then to do things ahead of time so that we know that this person is already like having, or the student is couch surfing, they might fall into like living on the street or in their car, the like we call it like literal homelessness sometimes, but the HUD definition of homelessness. But the more we can integrate these systems so that it's not a surprise when they show up at the door, but we've been knowing that, oh, from the school side of things this is going on, or from the health side. And so like in your friend's example, having this referral so that the day he's able to leave the hospital, they have housing set up for him. And the more we can integrate these systems, so I think some of these other communities like LA, Philadelphia, wait, Pittsburgh is Allegheny, Pittsburgh, that integrate these kind of information. It's a lot of work and need a lot of partners, and not just the nonprofit service providers, but the health system, government, school districts, all working together. But I think it exists out there. Who was I just talking to? Oh, I think San Antonio or Austin, one of those two cities. They were doing something similar too with their, instead of they're moving on from the VI spit out, but doing this data integration across all these different systems to be more prepared, be more proactive with providing services, or then for the person too, because they might not even think to ask for, they're so worried dealing with their health issue that they don't realize,
Right.
not even thinking yet about like, oh, I need documentation now to get into the housing too.
The VI spit out is a backwards looking tool.
Yeah.
We only use it for prioritization and it's going away. But hospitals use social determinants assessments in order to identify needs and begin to meet them. This begs the question as to if there are all these cross pollinating type of, what are we doing to identify needs quickly in a way that's not obtrusive, that then gives people referral opportunities to meet those needs.
Can you talk about the mobile health clinic and like where it's operating, how often it's operating, what that kind of looks like right now?
It's not operating yet. Oh wait, sorry. The mobile health clinic is operating. Sorry. Okay, just the mobile piece. Eric, do you know? Nope. Okay. Carrie was signed up, and she will know. It's a great question, and I will get back to you once I talk to the people who know. But yes.
Rotating monthly between East Orange County and West Orange County, like 1 to 2 days in the east side and 1 to 2 days in the west side at the moment. But I think they've got plans for the next 2 months to back for like summer.
It was a different one, but I know it like, yeah. I know like True Health has one too, because I've seen that at Salt before. So there's a few going around, but the UCF one, yeah, I think that's right. Yes.
You, with the component that you were looking at as far as transportation being there, have you also looked at the fact that homelessness being 24 hours is also affected by the barrier of 9 to 5? That some services that could be available to people who are experiencing if there were components available 24 hours or 7 days a week, that it would make an impact in the opportunities that individuals would have to serve.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's a big piece, and I mean even things like thinking about like restrooms as a service, like the fact that they're closed at nighttime, you can't just go to the library, even like you'll park restroom because they're closed at night. This is creating legal issues. It creates health issues, and I mean that's just one example. But I think this would be, I mean, definitely. So I think that's like a great potential idea too. So instead of just like mobile going different places, but it's timing of it doesn't need to be 9 to 5. If other things exist 9 to 5, maybe that's the new thing is it's open late in the evening or early in the morning. But and that's a great idea too. Thank you. I think I'm out of time. So thank you all. And if you think of more questions or ideas, feel free to email me. Oh, let me see.
Building each other's gaps, even knowing which organization also like, oh, they do know all come together. So next I have Yao Ming Lee and Ling Wei Sheng, and they'll be talking about digital navigation assistance for vulnerable populations.
Thanks. I think I got this one, so maybe I don't need the.
Probably not. Oh, you need both. There you go.
Oh, okay, I need both. Okay. Um, Hi everyone. My name is Ling Wei. I'm a postdoc at the Center for Public and Nonprofit Management. I got my PhD in public policy from Carnegie Mellon last summer and joined last July. Kyungmin, she's also a postdoc. Unfortunately, she cannot be here because she's now back in South Korea looking for a job. So we are all rooting for her. And so I'll be presenting on our project today. Oh, is this work? Okay, great. I don't know if the presentation is here. Oh, yeah, great. Okay. Um, yeah, cool. So actually, so as we speak, there are 2 volunteers. I think they should be here in the computer lab here, assisting the folks with their digital needs. So that is the project we're running. And I think Carla knows that, you know, we come here like pretty much every day. So I think this will be a good opportunity for me to like report to you what we've been up to all these years or all these months. So the Connected Orange is an initiative between Orange County and the Center for Public and Nonprofit Management. The mission is to provide digital navigation and literacy services to nonprofits and their clients to improve their digital access, economic mobility, and quality of life. Um, the project I think right now is wrapping up instead of December this year. So there are 3 components. There's the digital navigation, digital literacy, and tax support. So you can think about, you know, there are 3 different components all supporting one mission. So the tech support provides digital device so they can have stable access to a device and internet connectivity to complete the task. And then the digital literacy is a class that teaches them the skill. And then the digital navigation is sort of where they do the homework, right? Where they come to the different organizations and work with one-on-one, work with volunteers one-on-one to complete the task so they can like exercise the things that they've learned. So what is oh, okay, I can also speak up in the meantime. So thank you. Yeah. So what is the digital navigation program? As mentioned, the goal is to increase digital autonomy, bridge the digital divide, and improve economic mobility and quality of life. The digital navigators are trained staff or volunteers that provide one-on-one digital skill support. They provide assistance for the clients help them access online services, and also troubleshoot their devices, connectivities, and accounts. And why does this matter? So as you know, a lot of the essential services are now moving online. So people need to go online in order to apply to Social Security and all kinds of benefits. And that's also where they go to look for information, right? Which organizations do they go to? How do they get connected? What's the phone number, address, and so on. And the lack of digital access, digital literacy, and digital stability in this way can create significant barriers to obtain support. And those barriers further contribute to unmet needs, delays in receiving services, and repeated cycles of crisis. So we've been doing this program since last summer, and we have volunteers embedded in 9 different organizations. And you can see they, cover a range of different needs, providing services to unhoused individuals, but also youth, uninsured individuals, and so on. Here we have a video, but I don't think it's gonna work right now. So we'll return to it at the end of the presentation if we have time. But this is a fantastic video showcasing artwork at Grace Medical. So the research, the goal of the research is to understand, what clients need help with and what kind of assistance could be provided, and where in the application process do they get stuck and why. So understanding those patterns can help us better help the clients accessing digital services, but it can also inform, future digital inclusion interventions. For the research, what we did is we collected over 1,000 support tickets. So each time the digital navigator interact with a client, they will have to write down sort of, this is what we help them with, and this is the resource and skills that we provided to help them overcome the barrier. And with those tickets, we conduct a content analysis. So from each ticket, we want to understand what is the main purpose of this interaction, what is the specific task they're trying to achieve, what is the service domain. So is it a nonprofit or government provided service, or is it for like personal use? And then specifically for the nonprofit and government programs, we want to know what program they're working with, what is the technical assistance provided to solve that problem, where in the task stage do they get stuck. So is it, signing into the account, uploading the documents, or following up, contacting customer service? And then finally, we want to understand whether the barrier comes mainly from the client side or from the institution side. And we wanted to kind of identify both sides of the barrier to move away from like a deficit framing, right? A lot of times the burden is placed on the clients, like, oh, you need to improve your digital skills so you can access the service. But we also recognize there's a lot of institutional barriers that, requires onerous documentation and things like that. So we wanted to understand both sides of the story to help us better inform, future intervention. So this is kind of what the support ticket look like. We have this online system, so the digital navigators can, write down the answers to all these questions after each intervention. And here is like the example of the support ticket. So on our back end, each time the digital navigator, enter like a client, we were able to like track the client as well. So you'll come up with like number 4, number 5, if they come back like repeated multiple times. And then you can see it's like pretty detailed information that the navigators entered. So they like describe, somebody visited the computer lab and, to verify their ID.me account, but they didn't bring the documents. So we have to go back and, so we have to advise them to return later. And then later they brought the documents and, this is what we're doing. I'll show some like preliminary findings. And the last time I looked at the ticket was February this year. And at that time, we have about 900 tickets filed for both in-person and online help provided. And the majority of them are in person. So I think this is interesting because we offer this online component thinking, that could encourage people to seek service because, it's easier, like they don't have to come in person, they can just call us. But it turns out, the majority of the people prefer, in-person assistance. And as of today, I think we have over 1,000 tickets. So who are the clients that we're helping with? On the left, it's like a distribution of the age group. So you can see most people are 45 to 74, so like older adults. And in terms of the number of interactions we've had, so about 74% of them come to for help for the first time. But then there's about I think 25% that have that returned to follow up on the task they're trying to achieve. So so what are they looking? What are the clients requesting help for? As I mentioned earlier, we took the tickets and then we tried to extract all this different information. What's the main purpose? What's the specific purpose? So it turns out most of the clients came here to request help about service navigation. So that's just when they're trying to access some government or nonprofit provided service, and they need help with application or understanding the benefits, things like that. And then the second things they request help for is personal use. So that's like entertainment, shopping, or things with the device that they own. And then that's followed very closely with job search and applications. So the digital navigators also help the clients with creating a resume, completing online job application, things like that. So yeah. And then looking at the specific purpose, the number one thing they come here for is applying for and managing services and benefits. Followed by accessing service providers or administrative support, managing benefits, credentials, or material, and finding and understanding services and benefits. So most of the things are related to applying to or maintaining their access to nonprofit and government services. And then that's followed by tasks related to job application. So what kind of services are they accessing? So again, most of the services they're trying to access are government provided benefits. So like Social Security, SNAP, things like that. And then the second criteria is the personal or commercial digital service. So one caveat here is when we're coding the tickets, I think we categorized like my chart as a personal service because we weren't sure like about their insurance status. But one way you can think about it is it also kind of falls under like nonprofit provided assistance, because a lot of times they needed to use my chart, in order to access the healthcare provided like at like Grace Medical, for example. Yeah, so looking at the specific programs, Social Security benefits, SNAP, free phone service, that is the interesting one. A lot of people don't have stable access to the internet or phone, and most of the time people access internet with their phone. So that's a very kind of critical service that they are all trying to get. And in terms of nonprofit provided assistance, a lot of that is rental assistance, utility assistance. So I've helped clients fill out those applications here. And then for personal or commercial digital service, as I mentioned, we like coded my chart under this category, but you can also think of that as nonprofit provided service. But other than that, people still have issues with like financial services. So sometimes when they apply for benefits, they need bank statements, but they don't really understand how to access their bank statements online. So we have to help them create an account. And then also like medical services, what Andrew just talked about. Yeah. Um, okay. So after we know sort of, what they're looking for, then we want to understand where do they get stuck in that application process. And this is a very simplified process. So, start with just search for the application. Like, where do I even find it online? And then to create an account so I can sign in, verify my identification, prepare the documents, submit the application, follow up, access the service, and then call customer support if needed. So we have this like very simplified timeline, and then trying to understand sort of where they get stuck in this process. Yeah, so what we find is account access and sign-in is the most significant bottleneck. So you can think about like some clients, right? Like maybe they're in the later stage of their application, but then they come back and then they try to check like, oh, I would just want to understand like, what's the latest with my application? Do I need to schedule an appointment at this point? But then they cannot even complete the task because, they forgot their login information or they don't have a phone to complete the two-factor authentication. Um, so a lot of them, repeatedly get stuck at the account access and the signing stage. Um, and again, this is the earlier graph, but broken down by like service domains. So, and this is like the kind of the percentage, within each type of service. So for example, here, if you see the red line, that's the nonprofit provided assistance. And then you can see like 40% of the support tickets come from the account access and signing stage. So I think this is interesting because it can tell you sort of, what uh, like what stage during the application like do you need to sort of like improve and like make it easier for users to work with. And another interesting, I think, from the graph is when you look at government provided benefits, a lot of them, like 20%, got stuck around the account access and signing stage, but there's about like equal amount of tickets that comes from the follow up and status check and the service access stage. So I think that highlights this issue. Like it's not just difficult to apply to those benefits, but how do I like maintain access and to even like activate the service to keep using it? What we see is, clients come in and then they say like, oh, I lost, my credit card. And then in order to reinstate that, right, they need to call customer support and then have the mail here. But then there's all sorts of issue related to like verification. So we've seen people getting stuck, not having access to their credit card for like a month. And the verification is very difficult because you'll have to email like this government website and then with your ID, but then they'll get back to you in like 2 to 3 business days. However, most clients don't have access to computer, so we'll have to tell them, okay, just come back to the lab in like 2 to 3 days. But some people, forget or they cannot make it back in time. Then they have to do this process like all over again. Okay, so what kind of help was provided? So the top 5 technical assistance provided are creating and managing or using email accounts, obtaining knowledge about benefits application, filling out online forms, setting up user accounts, uploading or downloading documents. So those are all tasks sort of related to application of benefits. And then a majority of the technical assistance provided is also related to two-factor authentication. Like I could speak like on and on about like the evil of two-factor authentication. But yeah, you see, like, people have to come and like managing, retrieving credential, taking and uploading, photos or documents. So And lastly, I want to highlight, besides just the technical assistance, we also provided some kind of like non-technical assistance. So those are things like, learning about the benefits application, providing accessibility support, overcoming language barrier, and then understanding privacy and security. So I think there was a case where um, someone needed to reset their access to my chart, and then the only way you can do that is to call up their customer support. But then the person only speaks Spanish. But then when they were finally able to connect with the agent was like, oh, I personally speak Spanish, but I cannot speak Spanish with you because that's not allowed. I can only speak English with you. So it was like, so yeah, so it's very bureaucratic, but fortunately the digital navigator is there, and then they were able to translate for the client. So yeah, so even though sometimes there are like institutional support, the website or the service is supposed to be bilingual, but it's not really like implemented in a very convenient way. And then looking at the barriers, so again, like why do clients need those digital navigation service? Besides the obvious, lack of skill sometimes, they also don't have the resource. So for example, a lot of people don't have the phone, so they cannot complete two-factor authentication, they cannot take picture of their ID to even upload that for verification purpose. So in those cases, the navigator will use our device to complete the task for them. Yeah, and that is related to the poor management of credentials. And then looking at the institutional side of barrier, the top reasons are program and procedural complexity. So a lot of times there's you have to upload a lot of documents. They all come in different format. Is it a picture? Is it a PDF? And those are all very confusing for the clients. And related to that is the required identification requirements. So that is very, yeah, it's just bad. Okay, so what are some of the emerging themes that we're seeing? So again, like I'm just going through like less than half of the tickets. So I'm sure other things might emerge, but those are the things that we're seeing like repeatedly. Navigators, they act as critical intermediaries between vulnerable clients and the complex digital service programs. The most frequent breakdown occurs during account access and signing stage. Government programs particularly require assistance with follow-up, service access, and accessing customer support. So not just the front end of starting to apply to those benefits, but also kind of the follow-up, like make sure you can actually activate the service that you're entitled to. And then we also see that clients often need help not only in completing the task, but understanding how those services work and how to apply successfully. And many also require language assistance and accessibility accommodations. And lastly, identity verification requirement creates a significant barrier and can delay or prevent service access. So yeah, so what we see is digitization does not automatically reduce administrative burden. Online systems still require significant support. And government systems should prioritize user-centered design. Yeah, so we've encountered like websites that are like nominally user-friendly, but when you try to like translate the page, it actually just gives you a number to call. Not to like name names, but if you know, you know. And great. And then digital literacy and accessibility support remain critical. Identification verification process definitely needs redesign. And lastly, through this program, we're trying to build an administrative capital through knowledge base. So while our digital navigators are working through all these different tasks, they also build this knowledge base on the website where it's more like a FAQ, so they can go and quickly like refer the clients to those things. You know, how I think there's like a lot of how-to articles, like how to apply to like Social Security, and you know how to yeah, complete like various common tasks. So yeah, so not only are they kind of helping clients, but also accumulating that knowledge and like making it you know, useful and available to everyone. So thank you. uh, Maybe there's no time for question. Is there time for question?
Like 2 minutes.
Oh,
I think we're gonna have a few minutes at the end as well.
okay, yeah, either way works.
That was great. I was just asking, but I didn't realize how important digital even getting identity and logging in and stuff like that. Because as a street outreach person, I see it a lot. Like a lot of our older people, they've lost identity as far as like I used to be the grandma that cooks. The grandma that cooks, they don't have the house anymore. They don't have their ID. They have no idea what's going on socially in the world on phones, stuff like that. So it's interesting to see how that's such a barrier to really need more digital navigators, not just students, but like we're everybody has to be willing to tap in, you know, grandma, grandpa, someone to log in to fill in an application.
Little plug about that.
Go for it, yes.
There's actually training available in all the devices for anybody navigator, either as a volunteer or with the clients that you serve and work with. And so I'm sure you can
It's a small ripple, but it affects the rest of the community. There was a guy yesterday that I was talking to on LinkedIn. It was like, oh, do you have access to your what is it, your what you call it have their social security on a card? My access, something like that. They couldn't get on it because they didn't have email. They called their mom, like, hey mom, could you help me get an email? But she's like 80 something. He's 60 something. It's like, I don't know about that. So digital navigators, it's important. Small ripple things to affect. Next, Finley Blair talking about the social cost of
Thank you. To her, got it. Hello, my name is Finley Blair, and I am currently a second year PhD student at the University of Central Florida. Oh, so sorry.
I want to switch your mic because I think this battery is about to die.
Okay, and
I
I'll
can see it flashing.
I'll also talk louder.
Sorry, this room is horrible.
No, it's okay.
Okay, we're gonna
Learn to project, so it's good practice. Hi, my name is Finley Blair. Is it off or on?
I just know how to turn it on.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
You got this.
Projection. Thank you. Um, My name is Finley, and I am a second year PhD student at the University of Central Florida. And my research first, I want to shout out Lingwei because I feel like you teed up my research perfectly because I last summer worked as a digital navigator. And that is really where my research was born from, just observing the barriers that people faced when trying to access services online. Because I will admit, I love my phone. I love using it for everything online shopping. And so I always thought that technology just made everything easier and everything more efficient and effective. But I think through working as a digital navigator and seeing that, oh, actually, there are things that create burdens for people that are really just trying to improve their well-being was really eye-opening for me and has become my what I'm hoping will be my dissertation research. So this research is in proposal phase as well. So no data collection has occurred. It's more just establishing a foundation of what I am hoping to look at. And it's titled The Social Cost of Efficiency, How Social Capital Impacts the Success of Digital Governance. And so my research is really centered around this idea of what I call the efficiency paradox, which is technology integrated into government service delivery is seen as something that makes service delivery more efficient and more effective by reducing costs and transaction times, and reducing transportation barriers because people can apply online, or instead of having to print out a form, they can just download it and upload it to an application system. But in reality, there are some costs that are hidden in this idea that efficiency through technology integration um, is just automatically better. And I am arguing that those hidden costs are the social infrastructure that really help people navigate services effectively, which digital navigators are a part of that social infrastructure. So my research aims to answer the following questions. How do efficiency-centered policy narratives impact the use of social capital as an informal policy tool? And then the second question, how does bridging social capital shape individuals' experiences of administrative burdens and their ability to access government services through digital platforms? So before kind of diving into the research, I want to set the stage just a little bit. And name that 1 in 3 people who are experiencing homelessness report no internet use, consistent, reliable internet use in the past 3 months, whether due to not having access to a charger or broadband access or just losing or having a device stolen. And then in addition, in state level digital equity policy, 1/3 of those policies don't even have the language for people experiencing homelessness or unhoused, despite $2.75 billion being spent. And so that's extremely problematic because people who are experiencing homelessness have very specific needs, but when those needs aren't even named in policy design, then they are not tailored to. And so now getting into my main variable that I'm looking at, which is social capital. I feel like this is my most significant contribution because it is the resources that people gain through their relationships. And there are 3 different types: bonding social capital, which is that social capital, that support that you gain through your close ties, your close relationships, your inner circle, whether it's your family, your friends. Typically, it's groups that are pretty homogenous to you. And then bridging social capital, which is my main variable, is the capital that is really impacting information sharing, and it's your relationship with someone who is in a group outside of just your close inner circle, whether that's a student, a kid meeting a new student who is in a different socioeconomic status, or even just a person who is meeting a person in a different socioeconomic status who has information about resources that maybe you would not have or that your close inner circle does not have. And so just serves as an information sharing factor. And then linking social capital, which is typically the most complicated. It's one's connection to institutions, so one's relationship or trust that they have in an agency to effectively provide them services, and those who work at that agency knowing them well enough to be able to advocate for them when they are in the application or service delivery process. And so I also want to note that bridging social capital is one of the strongest predictors of accessing jobs, housing, as well as government benefits. And so for that reason, that's the variable that is most important to me and that I will be focusing on in my research. And so social capital, in the past, social relationships were seen as a barrier to effective and efficient government. And so they were typically like written out, and policy was designed in a way to remove the potential for relational elements to like occur in citizen interactions with this state. And then later on, research came out where actually these social relationships are beneficial to policy delivery and actually improve policy outcomes. But because of this long standing idea that these relationships weren't important and were actually ineffective, policy still does not typically name the impact of social capital as well as design it into policy or evaluate policy's impact on people's ability to develop these relationships that empower them to gain services. And so social capital has been linked with a higher likelihood of accessing services, having better health outcomes, economic mobility as well as exiting homelessness as well, and having higher levels of education and job earnings. So the one of the key concepts that is kind of also guiding this research is administrative burden. And so my argument is essentially that social capital moderates the experiences of administrative burdens that will typically serve as a barrier for people to persist in order to access government services. And higher levels of social capital will positively influence people's ability to persist through the barriers that they are facing in order to gain the benefits that will help them overall. And so there's 3 different types of costs within the administrative burden framework. There is learning costs, or the costs that people face when trying to learn about a service that they qualify for or understand if they are eligible for that service. And then there's compliance costs, the process or the burdens that people face when trying to prove eligibility, and whether that's a long line or a 212 question like SNAP application, that falls under compliance costs. And then psychological costs is the stigma, embarrassment, stress that people face when applying for services as well. And administrative burdens actually are deter up to 60% of people from accessing benefits that they qualify for, which is a pretty significant amount and has a large impact on policy success and intent. And so the theoretical framework that I am using is narrative policy framework, which essentially helps understand the stories that policymakers tell within policy. And this framework is helping me explain how traditional centered efficiency-centered narratives have led to social capital being invisible in policy design, even though it impacts policy success. And so because efficiency is our overarching goal and our typical traditional view of efficiency, which is just reduce speed and cost, technology is seen as the hero because typically it increases speed and reduces cost. And then efficiency, as mentioned, is seen as the moral or like what we are striving for. And then social capital, as mentioned, is that invisible character that is not named or measured in policy design. And then this is my conceptual framework where I just show how digital service delivery ends up affecting administrative burdens, which ends up affecting people's ability to access benefits. And then that moderating variable that I talked about, bridging social capital, which really impacts whether or not people are able to gain benefits and persevere through experiencing those burdens that can serve as a barrier to people accessing. And then I also wanted to note this finding from an article from 2001, which found that communities with higher levels of social capital had significantly higher rates of people exiting homelessness at 12 months, mediated through better service access through the information that they gained from their relationships. So it's extremely impactful. So the methodology that I am proposing is doing qualitative interviews and narrative analysis. And so the narrative analysis is decoding state level digital government policy and coding what is seen as the moral, whether it's efficiency, what is not named, social capital, which is what I am anticipating finding. And then the villain, which is bureaucratic red tape or these burdensome processes that can be resolved through the integration of technology. And then here are some of my sample interview questions that I feel capture what I am looking at. So the first, how do you usually find out about services that you might be eligible for? And bridging social capital would kind of be seen through someone answering, oh, someone that I met or a service provider who I know or my caseworker. And then social support, when things went well navigating a system, what was different about those situations? And so really looking at social support that people experience through navigating, trying to access government services, psychological costs. Is there anything about this process that feels stressful, demeaning beyond just the time that it takes to fill out an application or attempt to access a service? And then peer support or reciprocity. which is another element of social capital I didn't really touch on too much. But do you ever help others in your community figure out how to access services? So my expected findings are, I feel that social capital will be what I deem as an invisible character, something that's not named, as I previously mentioned, and that technology will be seen as the hero, efficiency, the moral, and then that performance metrics within digital government policy will measure speed and cost and adoption rates, but will not measure people's experiences or potential relationships that can be formed through effective delivery of digital government. And then as it won't measure trust, connection, support, or information sharing. And then I anticipate that participant experiences will show that digital platforms can reduce some burdens, such as maybe learning or compliance costs, but that those psychological costs will potentially be exacerbated through just feelings of isolation trying to navigate a complex bureaucratic system digitally without the support of someone to help. So here is kind of just an overview of what I mentioned about how the current story of digital government is that slow and costly government can be resolved through the integration of digital technology, where the goal is traditional like efficiency, where it's focused on speed and cost reduction, but that a new story, what I'm proposing and hoping that my research will provide evidence for, is that effective service delivery requires the cultivation of trust, connection, and support, not just technology to improve outcomes and speed up the process of people's ability to apply for services. So here is what bridging really looks like. So I know I kind of talked about it in abstract terms, so I just want to be a little more specific. So Lingwei did an amazing job talking about digital navigators, and so that is one aspect of bridging social capital that is important to policy success. And then another one is peer navigators.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
Yes, you.
No, you're fine. And then peer navigators, which research actually finds that peer delivered services with from people who have lived experiences help build trust quickly and are quick to develop that social capital that is needed to empower people to apply for benefits and reduces that stigma as well. And then again, caseworkers that develop real relationships with those that they are supporting, as well as informal peer networks or other people who are in situations. And typically, those relationships are built through like waiting in a waiting room or maybe a computer lab as well, where you are in a shared space with people who are probably facing similar struggles that you are. And you guys can support each other through sharing information about what you've learned about a process that you've went through that someone else is going through and vice versa, and really helps like foster that reciprocity that's really important in social capital and cultivating communities with high levels of social capital. So what would better look like? I also want to just make it clear that I'm not anti-technology. I do think technology is very important, but I think that making sure that those social relationships are the power of those relationships and social capital in policy design that is implementing technology is extremely important. So I do think that keeping the human option available for people to apply for services is very important, as well as just having hybrid service delivery. So having a digital navigator to support while you are attempting to access services. And then again, as well, peer navigation is extremely important, which I kind of talked about on the previous slide. And then designing for digital equity, as I mentioned, 1/3 of digital equity policies don't even name unhoused. And so I think it's very important to make sure that we're naming so we can target. And then my favorite, count social capital in metrics. So how is bridging social capital being cultivated through digital government policy and program implementation? And when it's designed, how are we evaluating it to ensure that we are not eroding it, but continue cultivating the relationships, and also just understanding the importance of those relationships as well, and not thinking that, oh, they're not important, so just throw everything online. And then also just the importance of having people with lived experience in design to ensure that we're understanding not just the policy development side, but also how it really looks on the end and the implementation. And then a couple questions that my research is not answering, but I think are still important, is digital social capital. So how can technology actually cultivate relationships? And then also, how do whatever findings that I come across, how do they operate in other countries? Are they generalizable? How do my findings impact other populations, such as older adults, people with specific disabilities, or those within rural communities? And then how do events like COVID-19 or other crises impact policy design, and how the narratives within policy design, as well as social capital in itself? So to kind of just end on a couple key things and key ideas that I'd love for everyone to take away is that the issue, I guess, is that traditional efficiency narratives in policy design can be problematic, and so it can result in informal resources such as social capital being overlooked, leading to worse outcomes for those that programs are meant to help. But I'm hoping that this research can serve as evidence towards integrating social capital into policy design and evaluation, and just make it more multidimensional. So, thank you. Any questions I'll take? Okay. And then, yes, my email and a little form QR codes up there too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, we got a question. Yes, to the back. We got a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. She has a question, right? So never mind.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
thanks for standing awkwardly with me. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope you guys are seeing
This works.
All right. Talking about the quality of life. Happiness. Right about that.
No worries. Thank you.
To click.
Oh, okay. All right. I will do my absolute best to project everyone. That is not my strong suit, but we'll give it a shot. Still no?
A little bit of commotion with people moving around.
Is that better? Better? Okay. I'll get louder.
Little pause to fix AB. Grab a muffin. Please do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Why don't we give everybody like
Okay.
a 3-minute break? Yeah, we're gonna
Perfect.
take a 3-minute break. Get out a little bit. Bathroom. And then we are gonna get into the great topic of quality of life. As a population.
going to shift gears just a little bit. I'm talking about the effect of quality of life ordinances on perceptions of police legitimacy among homeless populations. I will get in a little bit get into kind of the different terms I'm throwing around now: legitimacy, procedural justice. But I just want to start by providing you guys a little bit of background, which most of you all, I'm sure, are very familiar with. But in 2024, about 770,000 people experienced homelessness, and that's an 18% increase from the previous year. And just in Central Florida alone, 3,000 people experienced homelessness at that time. So, like, of course, I'm throwing around these statistics, but these are actually a reflection of a deeper social structural issue that's exacerbated by a housing crisis and economic inequality. You know, job market, as we all know, is bad, and just all around this economic inequality. So we'll get into kind of like the whole purpose of my study. I want to start by defining what quality of life ordinances are. Let me change this because it's messed up. Okay. So quality of life ordinances can be defined as local laws or city regulations that are aimed at maintaining public order or and urban aesthetics. And while they may appear kind of neutral on its surface, they often criminalize behaviors that are unavoidable for people experiencing homelessness, such as sleeping in public and panhandling. A good example of this is Florida House Bill 1365, which went into effect in October of 2024. And it makes it illegal to engage in public camping, even or to sleep outside, even when no shelter beds are available. And so this raises questions about the balance between public order and human rights. Try to use both. Okay. Wait. Okay. So kind of getting into my study. So several studies have found that quality of life ordinances disproportionately target people experiencing homelessness. And this typically looks like citations or arrests or displacement. And this creates legal penalties and long-term obstacles, such as criminal records that make it difficult to find gainful employment and maintain, well, get access to and maintain housing, kind of like we've been talking about all morning. So if I basically had to describe the main contributions of my study, it centers people experiencing homelessness and research on police legitimacy, and I'll get into that in a little bit. This is a group that's often discussed in research, but rarely directly studied. And there's also a lack of research that examines how people experiencing homelessness interpret their interactions with the police. Most studies center police perspectives or city policy justifications, but not the voices of those who are being directly impacted. And this study seeks to fill that gap, specifically of perceptions of police legitimacy in people living in Orlando. It also links quality of life enforcement, such as camping laws or ordinances, to individuals' lived experiences. This shows how policies are encountered on the ground. It extends procedural justice and legitimacy frameworks to a marginalized population, and this tests how well these theories hold in context of heightened vulnerability and frequent police contact. And it provides a rare firsthand empirical evidence by drawing directly on participants' perspectives. So overall, this study offers policy relevant insights, and particularly around enforcement of survival behaviors that shape perception or may shape perceptions of legitimacy and interactions with the police of people experiencing homelessness. Okay, so I've been throwing around these terms. I'll get into it now. But my study is grounded in procedural justice theory. It was developed by Tom Tyler and argues that people comply with the law not because of fear of punishment or primarily because of fear of punishment, but because they perceive the legal system as legitimate actors of authority. It refers to the fairness of the process used to make decisions by authorities when exercising their power. I often use the example of being pulled over by the police, and studies have shown that when people are pulled over, or given a ticket, they're less likely to complain later or file a report if the officer explains the reason for the person being pulled over. So you were speeding, you weren't, following the flow of traffic. They're less likely to complain and more likely to comply. Is widely regarded as the leading framework for understanding how individuals assess the legitimacy of legal authorities, especially the police. And in the context of people experiencing homelessness, it may be a situation where an unhoused person may follow a police order, not because they're afraid of being arrested, but because they believe the officer is treating them fairly and with respect. So we'll kind of get into this in a little bit. But if the officer says, I'm asking you to move along because this is a recently passed ordinance HB 1365, there is a nearby shelter that you can go to if you need support, as opposed to just making an arrest. So again, explaining that process. Okay, so we're going to get into some more terms. Let me make sure I'm at the right slide. Okay. So again, my study is grounded by Tyler's procedural justice theory, but also a more recently developed theory by Rising and Trinkner. And they refined the measurement of police legitimacy by distinguishing between two distinct forms of compliance. The first one is normative obligation to obey, or like a moral-based reason to obey. The genuine belief that police are rightful actors of authority. And then non-normative is more like a fear-based reason for complying. So fear of punishment, fear of being arrested. The authors also incorporated measures not just of procedural justice, like fairness, respect, and voice, like we just talked about, but bounded authority, which captures participants' concerns about police overstepping their legitimate power or boundaries. And then last, the willingness to cooperate, such as reporting crimes, or their willingness to report crimes or provide information. So the expansion of these scales by Rising and Trinkner emphasize that it's not just coercion, but fair and respectful treatment that fosters true legitimacy and trust. And this distinction is very important when you're talking about populations that, again, typically have frequent contact with the police than your, for lack of a better word, your average person, or under conditions of vulnerability. So getting into the methods, so I conducted focus group interviews of people experiencing homelessness who receive services here actually at Christian Services Center. Thank you again, caller, for all of your support. I interviewed 20 participants across 4 sessions. And these were individuals in groups of about 4 to 5 per session. And then they received a $25 gift card for participation. And these interviews were conducted in the summer of last year, actually. Yeah. Just kind of briefly provide you guys some background information on the participants. The average duration of homelessness was about a year. And then you all can see the screen. Just kind of average numbers of episodes, about 2 times. And the most common range was about 6 to 12 months. Getting into more demographic information, the average age of participants was about 55. The majority were male, had a high school diploma, were identified as Black, were US citizens, and then received some form of mental health or substance use disorder support, and these numbers are pretty standard of people experiencing homelessness. Okay, so this is just a sample of interview questions based on different categories that I'll again get into in just a bit. But so yeah, I first started by asking participants, like, do you know what quality of life ordinances are? Are you familiar with what these are? I gave them specific examples and asked participants, like, what are your experiences like with these the enforcement of these ordinances? What does that look like for you? And of course, I asked about their housing history, and gave, like, how many times have you been homeless in the past 3 years? And then I went into the different categories. Again, the ones derived from Rising and Trinkner, and then ones that I kind of derived based on the responses of the interview participants, and I'll get into that just a bit. And so again, here are just some examples of questions. So again, how many times have you been arrested or homeless in the past 3 years? Again, getting into normative obligation to obey. I feel a moral duty to obey the instructions of police, even if I don't understand the reasons behind them. Non-normative, people like me have no choice but to obey the police. Procedural justice, again, about fairness and respect. Bounded authority, overstepping their authority. And then willingness to cooperate. I will report a crime that I have witnessed. Okay, so based on the interview participants' responses, again, I was able to find support for the themes derived by Rising and Trickner, but again, based on my own, like how I derived the responses. Again, we'll get into that in a bit. So the first would be increased police enforcement of quality of life narratives. Criminalization for survival behaviors, structural causes of homelessness, and then structural racism. And then these are supported by the literature: procedural injustice, fear-based compliance, not legitimacy, bounded authority violations, and then conditional willingness to cooperate. Okay, so for our first theme, and then the quotes, hopefully you guys can see that, I'm pretty sure you can, is the increased police enforcement of quality of life ordinances. So in response to questions designed to kind of better understand people's experiences with the enforcement of these policies, many of the participants observed recent changes in response to the enactment of HB 1364. They specifically cited that ordinance or other like similar quality of life ordinances. They describe both an increase in police presence and perceived aggressiveness. I mean, it also, again, should be noted that the interviews occurred 9 months after the enactment of HB 1365. So one participant noted that at one point there was a typical unit that engaged with homeless communities in that area, but recently there has been an arrival of different police units in the area that seem unfamiliar with the community and the individuals who frequent it, and this heightened her sense of discomfort. This also suggests that, oh wait, yeah, sorry, lost my place. So this also suggests that an increased police presence that is unfamiliar with people experiencing homelessness may shape how the enforcement of quality of life ordinances are perceived. Other participants noted a recent increase in police enforcement, as well as a change in enforcement severity, and described a shift from more lenient punishment to harsher penalties. So the lack of warnings and escalations to arrests was a commonly cited occurrence across all 4 sessions. And as you guys can see from the screen, one participant noted the police don't give citations anymore, they just make arrests. And that's much more of an inconvenience for not only people experiencing homelessness, but for the officers themselves. It interrupts your life, and you will spend anywhere from a week to a month in jail. So normally we would just receive a citation beforehand. Another theme, let me change the screen. Another theme was criminalization for survival behaviors. And again, this was also found across all 4 sessions. And that not only are people being penalized for unavoidable behaviors due to their housing state, but they're not being given reasonable alternative solutions. So one respondent explained that medication for her health conditions caused drowsiness, and it makes it difficult to avoid falling asleep in public, even when seated in her wheelchair. Despite this, officers still instruct her to stay awake, and an expectation that she described as physically unrealistic. She suggested enforcement feel selectively applied, stating that the law comes around when it's feasible for someone, but not for everyone. And this illustrates how people experiencing homelessness may be penalized for unavoidable behaviors without reasonable accommodations or alternatives, especially when health issues are not considered. Similarly, another respondent noted that officers fail to consider that one's housing status directly impacts their behavior and are not providing alternative solutions. They don't understand too with somebody homeless, they don't be understanding that we have nowhere to go. People sit at the bus stop, and if you want us to get up, we don't have anywhere else. You, as the police, are telling us we can't do this. That's loitering, that's trespassing. Then give us somewhere else to go. The next was structural causes of homelessness. So after many expressed what they perceived as punishment for their social status, many participants also connected these incidents to broader systemic issues. So they noted that the rising housing costs, the lack of housing options like we've been talking about, and the inadequate social support systems as contributors or direct contributors to their housing instability. The enforcement of quality of life ordinances only addresses the visible symptoms of homelessness and not the underlying causes of these issues. So they noted their lack of shelter options, access to shelters as a barrier to suitable housing, and participants specifically noted the contradiction between the amount of housing development in this area that are often vacant, but the lack of homes that are actually affordable for people or low-income individuals. So someone said just a simple old hotel rooms over $1,000 a month. And it's crazy. Who can afford that? You have to work 2 jobs and then you're half dead. We can't even help mold ourselves together. But do you know how many pieces of land that people or the city don't have to take care of? Just buy cheap land, put up the trailers, one in probably every county, but the city doesn't want to do that. So respondents also indicated a connection between racial inequality and limited opportunities, and this suggests that structural racism was a significant contributor to their housing instability. Notably, the majority of respondents identified as Black, about 65%, and this aligns with nationwide trends that show that people of color are disproportionately represented among people experiencing homelessness. Additionally, participants describe incidents involving racial disparities at both the individual and systemic level. Specifically, participants noted that their race combined with their housing status made them more vulnerable in their encounters with the police. As you can see on the screen, someone said, "I'm not going to lie, the police don't like us Black folks. I've been called racial slurs." Another person said, "You're already scared because you're Black, and if you run, they're going to shoot you in the back. So you have to stay there and take whatever better comes around until Jesus comes." Okay, getting again into those themes derived by the previously mentioned authors. Participants describe interactions with the police as inconsistent and based in personal bias rather than fairness. It is perceived that officers entered these interactions with preconceived notions related to their homelessness status and again refused to consider alternative options as well as input. Participants reported incidents in which they felt officers simply were not listening, did not explain the process of their decision making, and treated them disrespectfully. And these sentiments counter major tenets of procedural justice that we discussed earlier, where citizens are given the opportunity to voice their opinion during the decision-making process. So in response to the statement, the police take time to answer questions completely and honestly. The participant noted that visible indicators of homelessness, such as carrying a backpack, carrying a backpack can contribute to the perception that police are targeting based on homeless or housing status. And again, this perception was described throughout all 4 sessions. And then targeting based on physical appearance communicates that people experiencing homelessness are burdens on society that need to be managed rather than individuals in need of support, dignity, and respect. Again, major tenets of procedural justice. And as someone said, you're homeless, you're down here, you got your job, you have things to do. If you don't have that backpack, we could sit at any park and you may even want to lay back and have fun with the police. But if you have that backpack, it's going to be a problem. So again, that visible indicator of homelessness. Obedience to the police was often rooted in fear of punishment rather than respect for authority. When participants were asked to respond to the statement, "I feel a moral obligation to obey the police," most expressed that their compliance was solely based on avoiding escalating the situation or being arrested. Many felt that they had no choice but to obey the police. And as one participant stated, I think I can see it. Okay, I can't see it from here. If you don't obey, the police force you to do it. Force you, or they force you in that police car. If an officer asks me a question and I don't agree with it, they get more intense. Like, we can do this, we can do that. So again, kind of getting into trying to avoid escalating an already tense situation. Many participants expressed that they were not afraid of the police officers themselves, but feared the consequences for not complying. So again, I only obey the police because I'm not afraid of them. Participants shared similar sentiments that you can see on the screen. I disobey because I don't want to get locked up. It's not fear, I'm not afraid. It's the consequences. I don't want to go to jail. Participants again expressed that their homeless status made them feel targeted by the police, and that officers should focus on more serious offenses that occurred than quality of life ordinances. In response to the statement, I feel a moral obligation to obey the police. Participants shared, the police are going to keep nitpicking. They see you as an easy target because you are homeless. They've been arresting more homeless people than rapists, murderers, or people for car burglaries. Participants describe officers as exceeding their rightful power of authority. Many express that officers often fail to provide individuals with assistance to get off the street. In response to the statement, police overstepped their authority. Even when I went to jail for public camping, one participant said, the police didn't tell us we had to leave. They just told everybody to get up, put your hands behind your back. They never gave us a warning or anything. They didn't read my Miranda rights either. Some participants discussed instances of physical overstepping of boundaries. Why do they, the police, have to search your bag before they ask any questions? One time I was riding my bike and I stopped in front of Orange Blossom Trail, and I stopped there on the sidewalk and all the way against the building. I just sat down drinking my water, and the officer comes up and dumps out my purse. A few participants also expressed that while the police have the power to temporarily make your path in life difficult, they cannot restrict your right to determine your own path in life. The police, make your life more difficult. I had a great job offer to start working with a trucking company, and that arrest could have blew that for me by just interfering with my life. So I wouldn't stop my journey, but it would disrupt, interfere, and make it difficult needlessly. Okay, and wrapping up. Cooperation was limited and context dependent. Participants said that they might assist the police only when approached respectfully or in moral-based situations. And this underscores the fragility of trust-based engagement between the police and unhoused populations. So in response to the statement, I would report dangerous or suspicious activities to the police. Participants shared, depending on their circumstances. Because for me, you can give off a certain, they being the officer, can give off a certain attitude. And if I feel like you're asking out of being concerned, that's one thing. I can halfway get with that. But then to encircle me as if I'm the part of the situation, I'm not going to help. Participants also noted that they would assist the police when it relates to serious crimes or involving vulnerable populations, specifically children. In response to the question, would you be willing to report a crime that you witnessed? Participants stated, if someone is going to hurt a kid or something, that's a different story. But if it's an adult doing something stupid to another adult, that's on them. So it depends on the situation. A few participants mentioned that they never report crimes to the police and often take matters into their own hands. In response to the question, would you be willing to report a crime that you witnessed? Participants stated, we don't call the police anyway. We're not going to do that. Okay. So in conclusion, findings show that fairness, respect, and recognition of authority boundaries remain central to the perceptions of legitimacy. So that it does support Tyler's theory of procedural justice. However, consistent with Reisig and Trinkner, most compliance among people experiencing homelessness was fear-based and not moral-based. So this means that participants obeyed simply to avoid punishment, rather than believing that police officers are rightful actors of authority. This shows that procedural justice can reduce, but not fully repair, the legitimacy erosion caused by punitive enforcement, specifically of quality of life ordinances. Participants describe having little voice in these encounters, experiencing disrespectful treatment, and facing criminalization for basic survival activities. And these findings suggest that perceptions of legitimacy erode when police authority is viewed as exceeding appropriate boundaries. This also shows how quality of life enforcement disproportionately constrains the rights of people experiencing homelessness. And so, in terms of next steps, I'm really excited that I co-author with a professor at the University of Central Florida, Denise Cordova Montez. And part of the interviews have recently been submitted to the International and Comparative Law Review. And so hopefully in the next couple of months, it will be in there. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of where these interviews go. And so we kind of did like a human rights analysis on perceptions of legitimacy, something that's often left out from a legal framework. I also would like to include perspectives of law enforcement. There were participants who noted that they do feel like there are officers simply trying to do their job. But there's obviously a disconnect between officers who are being tasked with enforcing these ordinances and obviously understanding that these are unavoidable behaviors. Also trying to kind of fill that gap between the intention of these policies, but of course the on the ground, how it's affecting on the ground implementation. I'm also in the process of analyzing jail bookings and arrest records using the Orange County Clerk of Courts records. I'm kind of trying to determine whether I'm seeing a significant difference between pre and post HB 1365 implementation patterns. And so hopefully these records will kind of complement the interviews, interview findings, and kind of provide a fuller picture of what we're seeing on the ground. So. And I believe that's it. Yes. Yeah, thank you. So welcome. Any questions, concerns, feedback, thoughts? Yeah. Thank you. I'm excited. Oh,
There is one more.
Yes.
I think that this is such an topic. In theory, if there is policy that there would be cooperation regards to attract law enforcement. With this research, further research, are you hoping to get certain things revealed? Or how would you advocate for that moving forward?
Yeah, great question. I mean, of course, I'm thinking short term in terms of like graduating, but also, but long term, something that was discussed during the interviews as well is like, where do we go from here? We know that like you can call it spade a spade. Like the ordinances are not effective, and that was expressed across the majority of participants. And so, yeah, ideally, I would love to, and maybe in future conversations, maybe future interviews, have conversations with people experiencing homelessness as well as law enforcement on ways to better like repeal HB 1365 altogether, or find ways to improve it, or find more effective policies. But I think based on the findings, based on kind of just like logic, it's not working. So yeah, yes.
Is your research finding that I think we get clues to it that enforcement is arbitrary, and is that an interest to you as far as looking into that more, because it just seems so arbitrary?
Right. And I again, based on the findings, that's something that I saw. And then going through the arrest records from the Orange County Clerk of Courts, there's a section on narratives. And I mean, it's kind of just looking at it logically, it's just not making sense. It's just not making any sense. And so, yeah, I think in the future, I think it makes sense to, if not repeal, then find better ways to improve it. If you're arresting someone for sleeping on the sidewalk, and I did see this in some of the narratives. There were some officers who did provide like pamphlets. Here's a nearby shelter. They were redirected, but in a lot of the cases, it just went straight to an arrest. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's something.
In your follow-up, in your legitimacy discussion, maybe think about the long-term implications of that
Mhm.
and what they have been in the past, passed on, and how that is going to shape our community in the future.
Yeah.
Because that says we lose trust in many of our organizations.
Mhm.
It's going to have a negative impact.
Yeah, I mean, again, widely expressed across all four sessions, and like we understand the history of like people of color and the police and perceptions of the police, but even among white participants, that was a sentiment that was expressed, a loss of the trust was already impacted, but then the enforcement of these ordinances only exacerbated that, worsened those issues. So yeah, I agree.
There's also the information that you have, and I feel like you might, I don't know if this is an research or not, to be able to use what you found to implement some sort of training, possibly or one of our agencies, sensitivity training for law
Yeah.
enforcement who are tasked to deal with those individuals and give them those resources to
Mhm.
get them. I don't know if you guys have that or back that up.
Yeah, I mean, something that I often thought about, just going through the interviews and then the narratives from the arrest records. It's like, again, like there were officers who provided people with those pamphlets. That's a shelter down the street. But there were also instances where it just went straight to an arrest. And so it is possible, like it is very doable to take that moment. Here's a pamphlet. Or there were a couple of instances where officers were like, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. And getting into procedural justice, explaining that process. This is a recently implemented bill. I'm going to give you about 30 minutes to gather your things and walk down to Christian Services Center. I'm going to receive some support. I mean, I think that it is doable. Training is, I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm definitely not. I'm not a law enforcement officer, but I do think it's doable. Yeah.
I actually provided, I trained over 2,001 corrections officers. So it's out there, and I did inspection as well, and I was previously, so I had like both just how to de-escalate. What officers told me, there's always going to be bad actors,
Yeah.
right? There's always going to be ones that do not care. Some of it's jaded. They're arresting the same people over and over again. They're saying things like move, and people are like, no, I want to be out here. And they're like, my hands are tied, right? This is what I have to do. But I've also talked to a ton, and some of them might be here where they're like, we are putting people up in hotels on our own. One of the biggest things I've seen is that we don't have bus passes that law enforcement have to I've done now, where they're telling people where to go, and then people are like, okay, can you transport me? And they can't. They lose transport. They don't have bus passes. It's almost like you're sitting, but what I've heard is they don't want to. The majority of them don't want to, right? They don't want to be the bad. They really want to help people. I've gotten tons of calls for like, how, where do we put them? What do we do with them? There are always going to be bad eggs. What they want to do, but a lot of it is like so many resources. But the CIT training is continuing. It's every month. It's like 22 classes a year in Florida, so it's definitely.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a disconnect between like the policy implementation and again what's happening on the ground. And you can see in the interviews, you can see in like the arrest records, like there are officers who are trying. But I think that there's some who, their hands are tied. And the support just simply, or maybe the support isn't as easily accessible. And so that's why I would love the input of officers. I would love to interview some officers for this study. So maybe for a future study. I don't know. Daughter saw my hand. Yes. Mm. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, one of thank you for that. And like one of the participants that you saw on the in the presentation described her like having like health issues and medication that she had to take that caused her to be drowsy throughout the day. She even bought a wheelchair so she would have a reason to like to rest and sleep. The issue with that is that you can't sleep during the day, obviously. You're not allowed to sleep at night in public. So then what do you do? So she was told multiple times you have to stay awake. And then like, how is that possible when you're taking medication for high blood pressure issues that make you drowsy? So kind of, yeah, there are serious like health implications involved with it. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question about your I think a common misperception in the public is that people who are homeless would prefer to get arrested because they have a bed to sleep in and 3 meals a day.
Mhm.
I work in criminal defense and I've never really experienced it like that, but I was curious if you had anybody that mentioned anything like that.
Not at all. I mean, there were many who were saying I either have a job or I'm looking for employment. Like it was crazy to see. Like a lot of them were like had the reason they were homeless was because of like health issues. The reason they were homeless is they were recently like let go from their job. A lot of them were like worked in government and were recently let go. Um, and so these are not people who want to be on the street. Like these are people who want jobs. These are people who want housing. And there's obviously barriers to that. So yes.
Appreciate very much. While being able to approach, you took some research, telling stories of people that were experiencing interactions with police officers on the street. Was it just in the city of Orlando? So just here at Christian Service Center, right?
Yes. Most of them, I think there were a few who expressed who said that they go to, I think it's the Coalition for Homeless. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So they often will say, across the street, right across the street. But I think the majority were specifically people who were here in Orlando, um, who received services here from Christian Services Center. Yeah.
I think just a comment on some of the conversation, and I'd love to learn more. But we've been trying to work with police officers in Central Florida who I think while they are interested in solutions and helping, they're also resistant to learning additional information that may inform their approach to interacting with people who are unsheltered on the street. Um, and I think that it may be that police are the wrong folks to talk to. I mean, we have complete policy disputes with the governor's office on the way down. So as soon as the law was enacted, every Florida enacted its own ordinance without question.
Mm.
And so we have changed the way that we approach people on the streets in the city as a result of a legal apparatus that happened in Tallahassee. Now we're all trying to figure out the impact.
Yeah.
impacts are severe.
I agree. Yeah. Yes, sorry.
Um, this is really good presentation. From a public policy aspect for students enrollment, what would be two recommendations that you give?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should emphasize that it, there are underlying issues to homelessness. Um, Again, like most people are not on the street because they want to be, and so if we could start by like trying to address the underlying issues that cause homelessness first. I think it starts there. So, you know, obviously lack of housing, especially here in Orlando, lack of affordable housing, um, more access to social support services, um, economic inequality, access to jobs. I think starting with that, right? And then I think maybe some form, if we can't completely, you know, I think it's probably unrealistic to completely um, get rid of HB 1365 or similar ordinances, but figure out ways to improve them, figure maybe more effective ordinances. Um, it may even be more effective to like provide some sort of training to officers. If you can't really get around HB 1365, maybe emphasize with officers the importance of like redirecting people to nearby shelters. I even thought again, reading those narratives, like what if it is required? Like just like if you look at the narratives, I think they're required to state that their body worn camera is on. So along with that, maybe being required to note, I redirected them to this nearby shelter. I asked, you know, what are some services that you need, and then like this shelter provides those services. Again, I'm not a homelessness expert. I'm not in law enforcement, but maybe requiring some sort of training or maybe a statement along when you provide when you make an arrest. Maybe having a statement stating this is what I did to support. Um, the person that I'm arresting. So, yeah, addressing the underlying issues of homelessness, starting with that, and then figuring out ways to improve the enforcement of these quality of life ordinances. So, thank you.
So, good morning, everybody. So, before I introduce the Living Experience Council that will close out our
check out of that room, which is just a paper trail. I just sign a piece of paper saying I'm checking out, and in 30 seconds, signing a piece of paper saying I'm checking in. There are a lot of legalities that happen within the homeless community that make it frustrating is a nice word to put in. Impossible is the situation you're dealing with each and every day to deal with homelessness.
Talk a little bit about the services and the system. What has it been like using programs and services, especially ones that are online? And how did you feel supported? How far did you?
How do I answer that? Because so for me, so during my homelessness, it was just calling left and right. Anybody that would answer the phone, any social worker, any therapist, anybody at all, didn't know about drop-in centers like this because it's not marketed. You know, like sometimes on Instagram it'll be like, oh, free karate classes, and you know, go do this spa treatment with the girls, whatever. There's no like pop up. Hey, are you homeless? Here's resources. Here's services. Here's where you can go to. That wasn't really there online. So that online presence of how to get help. There is hope. There is this that you can go to. I see this much, or didn't see this much then. So I didn't ever feel supported because I would call so many people and I could tell it's just another call. Or it's another person in crisis, another person falling apart on their line, another burden for them to just be like, I'm not help you, baby. Good luck. So online help sucks. Especially when you have fun.
And if you have a phone, where are you going to charge it? Because there are more and more places that are closing your charge ports. They do not let you in. A phone doesn't charge in 3 seconds. So you need to be there. Even if you go to the library, you got to find a quiet, non-intrusive place to charge your phone. I've seen people be very creative, especially after 5 o'clock, where they can find a port in, I guess, a pillar and charge. And I salute them because homelessness is surviving. It's not living, it's surviving. You have to be creative. You have to be inventive each and every day, especially after 5 o'clock.
I just want to add to this, talk a little bit about the different services and scaling up the number and for more efficiency. And that's something, so when I experienced homelessness, I didn't receive any supportive services. The one support that I did have was government benefits. And that was just when access online was a thing, and navigating that in itself, trying to get food stamps, trying to get Medicaid, that was a piece in itself. So, great thing, 20 years later, and that's another program that does that helps navigate that whole system. But even now, it's crazy that those barriers still exist. Okay, so let's talk about so what's the service providers or law enforcement do to actually help that you have seen? And maybe on the flip side, maybe talk a little about something that they should do a little bit for that can help them engage with people.
As I said, Connections Ministry is a ministry of advocacy. And it started out of my experience with homelessness and trying to get services for myself. I found that the voice that was missing was lived experience. A lot of places that I would go didn't really understand the experience I was going through, especially if it was 2 o'clock in the morning. So advocacy is huge. When you are connected with the case manager or the organization or the resource, and for me, the thing is for me to know exactly what the agency does. I can call Carla and ask her what she's doing, what she needs, and she'll tell me.
Men's underwear.
When I go out and I'm trying to connect with Samaritan Resource, I know what they need. Connecting, networking being a part of the situation or solution together is crucial. But the element that's needed is when I go out at 2 o'clock and I ask someone, do you really need blankets? Do you really need socks? Do you really need food? Those connections make it easier for me to know how to help service providers, how to be there for the individual needing.
So as a service provider, I know where it's difficult because we're so focused on the numbers and how many people we house, how many people we close, how many service touches, how does it look for the grantors and the funders and all of that. But as a service provider, what I found works the best, I can get the best results out of the clients that I'm working with or whoever it is I'm working with, literally connecting with them. Like there's some we're working with, that's one thing we can all connect on. So really just, dang, so it looks like I'm having a hard day, or okay, this person just moved in actually last week. She just moved in and she had nothing to eat in her fridge. She's got the house, she's got the bed, but she doesn't have food in the freezer. So I went fishing with her. And I let her keep the fish, but she knows how to gut it, whatever the case. That keeps food going, and it created a moment because we're spending time just like, well, we're not talking about housing. We're not talking about what went wrong in your life and how I can fix it and how I know all these different resources to point you to. But literally just having that human moment of just like, life's been through a lot. Life has been kind of hard. That's pretty difficult. And you don't have to trauma dump with your person to be like, well, I've been through a hard time too. I skip I need to. You don't have to do that. Just simply being human, just sitting in that moment with them, not being so pushed on how many people I have to talk to, or my caseload is packed up to the roof and I have to meet this person and log this and case note that. Don't be so focused on that. Be focused on like really connecting with the person besides their number or client track number or whatever the case. Literally get to know who is whoever it is I'm talking to. See them as your brother, as your sister, as yourself. If I had to cuddle up with rocks on the sidewalk and caterpillars and gum, what would I want? What would I probably be in need of? Even giving someone, one of my coworkers, I gave one of the clients a perm because she needed a perm. Looking cute is important. As a woman, always, you gotta be styling and profiling, always. For a man, okay, you need a job, but what do you like to do? Because I could line you up with whatever work there is, doing construction and blazing in the hot sun, but what do you like to do? What is your call? What is your purpose? Speaking to people with like a people focus, like if you were my friend, if you were my sister, how would I encourage you? Talking to the same people you deal with every single day, that same way. And it works.
And to Rico's point, and I don't think you might understand this, we met originally because I was the program manager for a program she was in. And that is something, and I did that for about 10 years, and that was something that I think made a big difference in how I approached the work and my rapport with my youth, is I centered everything I did with them. And I had a different perspective, obviously, because I saw a lot of myself in them. But everyone's journey is different. Everyone's story is different. And I remember the first time someone like sat with me and was right out of school, and I was like, personal, professional, separated. And the young man told me, like, you're just here for a paycheck. I told him to Google my salary because clearly I wasn't. But that opened my eyes to something like, okay, I'm missing the human part of this, and because I'm so passionate about this work, that was vital for me to incorporate more. And from that moment on, that's something that I have always kept at the center of everything that I do and feel. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I do think that gets missed along the way, especially with all the other structures we have, with meeting the numbers, with finding something, with all of like our own personal stuff. And to that point, the lived experience council impact. I remember finding out about lived experience. I want to say about 5 years into the field, and it blew my mind that there was actually a space for people with lived experience to contribute to the conversation. Granted, that was about 10 years ago, so it's very different now. And I love that we have been able to create this community in Central Florida that I've seen from the ground up with the youth advisory committee for 40 years and with the lived experience council, and that you see the difference that it makes, the conference tables that we are able to be at. Can you guys talk a little bit about how has being part of the lived experience council changed things for you?
It's given given the opportunity to be a voice. It gives me the opportunity to walk into situations and say, I can speak from both sides. Being an advocate, I know all of the agencies and organizations that speak for you as well as what you do, whether or not it is a job program, a food program, a housing program. I can go out and say to individuals in the street, no, this is what they do. No, this is the time. No, this is the person, the contact. But I also have gone through those things myself. So having the experience when I do speak to a person, I speak at that level. I'm saying, Elise, I'm saying, Erica, this is what they're going to do. If you see Carla, if you talk to this person, this is what they're going to do. Rather than handing them a sheet and saying, this provider will help you. I do the same thing with law enforcement. I am an outreach person, a street person. So I go into the street. I talk to officers and I will say, hey, this is the panel, this is the form you're giving out. Do you have any in your car? I know the people in my neighborhood. So I can speak for Adam and tell people, well, Adam is going to want Ernie to play with today. And that's why he's walking the street. So being able to be that voice for both sides, having lived experience, has given me the opportunity to feel like I'm adding value to the conversation that I hear all the time.
Being part of the lived experience, so I started as from the youth advisory board, where we kind of help sit down with HSN and kind of tell them, well, we think this is how the homeless services for youth and adults should be ran. These should be implemented in these kind of trainings and these kind of programs, and this is how case managers ought to work. This is what's working, this is what's not. And within me doing that, that kind of opened up a voice that I didn't know I had. I used to think I had stage fright. I spoke in front of their Brighter Days campaign launch. I spoke at their luncheon, and that actually got me this job now, doing my purpose, which is connecting with people and helping them know that this is what you want. It's definitely changed a lot of my life, and just, absolutely. Second part of the question.
Thank you. And now for our lived experience book. So we are constantly looking for members in Central Florida. That is something I've noticed a lot of people don't know that we exist. We do exist. And we have a QR code here for anyone who is interested. Please share with your clients, the people you work with. We're happy to sit down and have a conversation with you. Hopefully you can hear me. Sorry, I didn't think about the microphone. And tell you a little bit more about what we do and how you can be involved in that. There's different opportunities from smaller level, just attending the meetings, to executive leadership opportunities, and just we're very big on developing skills, leadership skills for people with experience so that they can go into the community and be a voice with others. So thank you for your time. Do you have any questions? We have flyers, by the way, so if you want one. Awesome. Thank you. You guys have a great afternoon.
Again, I just want to thank you all for coming, and I just would ask that you give one more very energetic, very loud round of applause for everybody who came up and presented, and for all the so I know we have, we're going to be doing tours. We're going to give you guys a little bit of a break, maybe 10 minutes, so that you guys can talk to each other as well as mingle and talk to some of the researchers that presented information, as well as the Lived Experience Council. If you'd like to ask them questions one-on-one. And then, if you want to go on a tour, meet me up here right at 12. All right? I think it's 11:48 right now, so you have 12 whole minutes. to hang out, pleasantries. Okay, we understand you guys have busy lives, and so please feel free to grab snacks on the way out. And thank you so much for coming.